ESG, you've heard a lot about it. Environmental, social governance. It is impacting everything that corporate America is doing. But what about in Missouri? Well, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, who, of course, is also running for governor, has used unusual powers of his office to create new restrictions around investing with a climate sustainability or social justice component and how banks can practice it. I want to welcome on Patrick Ishmael with the Show Me Institute to dive into this and what it means. Patrick, good morning. Thanks for joining us, and take us through the pros, any cons as you see it, and what this means for Missouri moving forward.
Yeah, of course. So Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft implemented a rule that took effect last month that required financial advisors to inform clients of whether any of the investments that they might be making would be going to these sorts of funds that promote environment, social governance activities. And so it's kind of a social justice, kind of not necessarily woke, but kind of borderline woke investment strategy. And the reason that rule is important is because, as a general matter, for a long, long time, the view on investment was that if you're a financial advisor, if you have a fiduciary relationship with a client, you need to be out there trying to maximize their profit, which is really just another way of saying, in this case, maximizing their well-being. You want your client to be better off at the end of that relationship rather than worse off because you decide to invest in something that's popular, or it's a bad investment, or it's an investment that promote some sort of political objective. And it's interesting, too, because, Secretary Ashcroft and I went to law school at the same time, actually shared a classroom for one of our classes, corporate tax, over at St. Louis University. And this is probably 2008 or so, and it was the first time that I had been introduced to this concept of, moving towards the sort of stakeholder capitalism where you're not really focusing on stockholders and maximizing profit, but you're actually integrating in these other ideas like, social justice issues as part of your corporate governance, as part of your investment strategy. I think that it's really important. It's kind of like if you're an investment advisor, you should probably be telling your clients if among the funds that they could invest in, that you're recommending that they might be going into a fund that produces for them the biggest commission. In that case, that's a situation where if a client wants to provide the biggest commission to their advisor, that's their prerogative. But in a scenario where you're trying to maximize profit for your client, you also need to reveal any sort of conflicts of interest or any conflicts that may go against the interests of their client. And I think that Secretary of State Ashcroft's rule here is a great rule for transparency. I think that investment advisors should be transparent about all aspects of their investment strategy, particularly with ESG, where it's oftentimes viewed as a neutral or kind of negative investment compared to just investing in the market and not considering those ESG objectives. I think that, going forward, the legislature really needs to step in and make sure that its own funds don't have these sorts of nonprofit maximizing investment strategies, because at the end of the day, when you have a fiduciary responsibility, whether it's with the state or to a private client, you need to be out there maximizing their profit. And really, anything other than that is unfortunately politics, and really has no business in those free market decision making unless the client is aware of it. And I think oftentimes they just simply aren't aware that ESG is part of their portfolio.
So this is one of those deals where, whether it's a state investing in pensions or whether it is individuals around Missouri using an investment advisor, they're going to now have to be transparent. If they're not investing in things that are just about making their client the most money and more about, checking off boxes for environmental and social governance, they'll have to say to their client, hey, this is what I'm doing. But I just wonder how much of a gray area this really is, where it sounds good on paper, and I'm glad that the Secretary of State is doing it, but how enforceable is it? And if there are ways around it from investment professionals to basically say, well, that's not really what I'm doing, and here's the loophole I'm using to get out of it.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I think that, from a rule perspective, from a law perspective, it's as powerful as any other rule or law that the state might promulgate. But at the same time, I think you're exactly right. There is a possibility that you could start seeing a kind of a reframing or a renaming of a lot of these investments that were ESG, but now they're going to be ES R, whatever R might be.
Yeah.
We've seen this with DEI. We've seen this with a wide variety of other kind of woke initiatives. And so, to the extent that the rule can be walked around by changing the language or basing the investment decisions off of some other priority and emphasizing that over, that the fund might be ESG adjacent. I think that, the best thing that could happen here is that the legislature steps in and provides very clear guidance for what can and cannot be avoided when it comes to these ESG rules and regulations. And, it is true, of course, that, when we talked about curriculum transparency, this year and last year, one of the real questions, one of the focuses is like, well, this isn't critical race theory. What is critical race theory? Which is one of these core tenets to a lot of these woke initiatives in classrooms, in K-12 classrooms. Can you define critical race theory and those associated concepts? And the answer is, yeah, you can. I mean, the legislature has been able to do that, been able to close a lot of loopholes in language, and I think that is certainly something that they can do with ESG. But they need to sit down, talk about how to do it, outline some laws that would do it, and actually pass those laws. And then the real, I think, challenge here is that the legislature, particularly the state Senate, is willfully incompetent. I don't know, but a lot of the stuff should have gotten done last year, and I think it's been left to the secretary to do this year is unfortunate.
Well, you're right about that. I was going to add to the conversation and say, when it comes to relying, unfortunately, on this Missouri legislature, they seem to do less with more than most state legislatures, unfortunately. Last thing, I don't know if you saw, Patrick, but Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball commissioner, is in Kansas City this morning. He's doing a press conference at the Urban Youth Academy, and he's going to talk about the benefits of other baseball teams who have built new stadiums with ballpark villages and how successful it has been for area economies. I know you might have a message for him there, so what's your message to the Major League Baseball commissioner who might be driving to the Urban Youth Academy and listening to you right now? Patrick Ishmael, go.
Kansas City is a wonderful city. Welcome to the city, but I don't think we need the same old song and dance when it comes to economic development promises from big league sports team, whether it's baseball or football. And I know that the Major League Baseball organization is now pressing for, I think, big renovations in Milwaukee, about $500 million there. I mean, this is just what the company does. And that's the reality is that businesses have a right to try to get benefits from government wherever they can and whenever they want. The reality is that our government doesn't have to kowtow out them every time. And so welcome, Commissioner Manfred. Enjoy your time here. But with all due respect, I hope you leave empty-handed.
All right. Well, it doesn't sound like you guys are going to be getting lunch today, Patrick. We appreciate it, my friend. Thanks, as always, for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. Patrick Ishmael on KCMO Talk Radio. We'll see how Rob Manfred's visit goes today. Just quickly on the ESG stuff, the environmental, social governance nonsense that's permeating corporate America on a daily basis. So Target, I don't know if you saw this morning, but Target shared that its sales down 5.4% year over year in the second quarter, and they're admitting that a lot of that was because of the backlash surrounding their Pride collection that impacted them May into June. Because, of course, it wasn't that they were like selling rainbow shirts. That's not what they were doing. Of course, by now, you probably know the story that not only were they doing that, which most people would just kind of walk right by, but they were selling tuck-friendly swimsuits for children in prominently displayed parts of their stores. That's what Target was doing. They got Bud Lighted to a degree. Now, no one's going to get the Bud Light treatment. Bud Light is in its own category, but Target did get Bud Lighted to a degree. And their CEO admitted as much. Brian Cornell said on a earnings call with reporters, on a call with reporters, not the earnings call, but he said on a call with reporters per the Wall Street Journal, as we navigate an ever-changing operating and social environment, we are applying what we learned. Referring to the backlash the company received in June. An ever-changing operating and social environment. No, you are not in the business of social. You are in the business of selling food and selling clothing and selling Chip and Joanna Gaines merchandise. Like, that's what you do. No one cares what Target's social stances are. That's not what you're in the business of. But remember, the companies are getting a lot of pressure from the BlackRocks and the Vanguards of the world to be in the social space. That helps their stock price. That helps the company then in turn. There's an incredible amount of pressure for that. Instead of a CEO who even 15, 20 years ago would have just said, hey, our job is to sell as much of this stuff in this store as we can. Now it's like, well, we're navigating a social environment. Just sell your crap to Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians and communists if they want to buy things. Like, sell it to all of us. That's it. But this ESG stuff, that's where it all stems from, in large part.